In the history of nations, across continents and centuries, there is a ghost, a recurring, malignant pattern that stalks every great power after it reaches the peak of its glory. This pattern does not rely on military conquest or decisive battlefield defeat. It behaves more like an internal economic virus, a self-inflicted disease of finance and ambition that has destroyed at least 3 global empires over the last 500 years with terrifying precision. The Spanish Empire, which once controlled half the world's gold and silver, collapsed into 4 bankruptcies in just 80 years. The British Empire, where the sun never set, declined into the status of a former empire in less than 40 years. The massive nuclear-armed Soviet Union vanished in just 900 days, not from war, but from economic implosion. 3 great powers, 3 complete collapses, and all followed nearly the same steps. Today, the global scene suggests that the United States of America is walking down that same irreversible path. Welcome, I'm Amr Abdeen. But before we reveal the 5 completed stages of America's decline, take a moment to subscribe and activate the bell. And if you enjoy games that challenge the mind, check out our new puzzle game, Kalimat Words, linked below. To understand the looming crisis in the United States, we must first internalize the ancient lesson behind every imperial collapse, the deliberate destruction of the currency. The fall of an empire always begins with the destruction of trust in its money, a process repeated with stunning accuracy from ancient Rome to modern America. The disease is identical, only the metal changes. The Roman Empire, dominant for over 5 centuries, built its integrated economic system on absolute trust. The cornerstone of this trust was its silver coin, the denarius, introduced in 211 BC. It was a tangible asset, a coin weighing 4.5 grams of pure silver. For centuries, it maintained its purchasing power because the Roman state preserved the purity of the metal. When a citizen accepted a denarius, they held real, verifiable wealth. This stability enabled unprecedented trade, taxation, and economic cohesion across vast territories. But empires are insatiable. With each expansion, costs grew. More armies, more forts, more roads, more bread to distribute. Eventually, the empire's expenses exceeded its revenues. The temptation to cheat became irresistible, and Rome turned to the strategy every failing empire eventually uses: currency debasement. The degradation began subtly. Emperor Nero, seeking to fund his lifestyle and military campaigns around 60 AD, reduced the silver content of the denarius from 100% to 90%. That 10% difference was pure profit for the emperor. The same amount of silver produced more coins, increasing the money supply, a hidden form of inflation. Nero had imposed a silent tax on every Roman holding a denarius. This was the first cut to the imperial artery, and the decay accelerated from there. Each emperor found it easier to print more money than make painful spending cuts. By 211 AD, under Emperor Caracalla, the silver content had fallen to 50%. Just 50 years later, under Emperor Gallienus, the denarius contained only 5% silver. What had once been pure silver was now mostly cheap metal coated with a thin silver wash. Rome had destroyed its own currency. The consequences were immediate and devastating. The purchasing power of the denarius collapsed. Prices exploded, leading to hyperinflation. Farmers refused to sell food for worthless coins and demanded barter instead. Even the Roman legions refused to fight unless paid in gold, because the silver coins were literally not worth the effort of carrying them. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD was not caused by military defeat at the hands of Germanic tribes. It was a self-inflicted economic collapse. Rome could no longer pay its armies, administrators, or infrastructure costs, because it had destroyed the currency that made taxation and trade possible. When the currency died, the empire died. Empires collapsed from within, beginning with the printing press. 12 centuries later, history repeated itself in Spain during its golden age in the 16th century. After the discovery of the Americas, Spain controlled lands of immense wealth. The Cerro Rico mountain in Bolivia, discovered in 1545, produced half of the world's silver for an entire century. Spanish ships carried this wealth across the Atlantic, filling royal treasuries. The Spanish silver dollar became the first true global reserve currency, trusted worldwide because it was pure silver. Spain became the richest and most powerful empire on earth. And then it made Rome's mistake, amplified by a unique flaw. When money becomes overly abundant, its value falls relative to goods. Spain flooded Europe with silver, triggering widespread inflation. What cost 1 coin in 1500 cost 10 coins by 1600. Worse, Spain produced nothing. It had no industry, no innovation, no domestic manufacturing base. It extracted wealth from colonies and immediately spent it on wars, palaces, and imported luxury goods from more productive nations. Silver flowed from America to Spain and then straight to Europe. By the late 16th century, the Spanish crown was drowning in debt. King Philip II inherited massive liabilities and, instead of cutting spending, borrowed even more. When these debts became impossible to service, Spain declared bankruptcy in 1557, the the first modern state bankruptcy. Then again, in 1560, 1575, and 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years, despite controlling half the world's silver. The empire eventually debased its currency by mixing silver with copper. By the 17th century, the richest empire on earth was economically broken, destroyed by spending and debt. The pattern holds. Currency debasement and reckless spending are the economic virus. The disease next found its host in the British Empire. At its peak in 1922, Britain controlled a quarter of the world's land and population. Its currency, the pound sterling, was the global reserve currency, backed by gold and trusted everywhere. But Britain financed its vast empire through debt. World War I delivered the decisive blow. Britain's national debt rose from $650 million in 1914 to more than $7 billion by 1919, a tenfold increase. To finance the war, Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound became a piece of paper backed only by a promise. In 1925, Britain disastrously attempted to return to the gold standard at an overvalued rate, crippling its exports and economy. By 1931, it abandoned gold permanently, and the pound lost 25% of its value overnight. World War II pushed Britain into total fiscal exhaustion. By 1945, debt had reached 270% of GDP. At Bretton Woods in 1944, the US dollar replaced the pound as the global reserve currency. The empire unraveled quickly. India gained independence in 1947. The Suez Crisis in 1956 revealed Britain's inability to project power, and colonial possessions dissolved over the following decades. Britain did not fall on the battlefield. It fell to debt and currency collapse. The Soviet Union provides the most recent and frightening example of rapid collapse. After World War II, it emerged as a nuclear superpower controlling Eastern Europe. But beneath the surface, the economic virus was quietly consuming it. The USSR spent 15 to 20% of its GDPs on the military, 3 times America or S share, while its centralized economy stagnated. Factories produced low-quality goods, innovation died, and agriculture failed so badly that the USSR had to import grain. Its currency, the ruble, was irrelevant internationally. The Soviet government paid for foreign goods with gold and oil because nobody accepted rubles. When oil prices crashed in 1985, the USSR's revenues collapsed. Gold reserves dwindled. Economic pressure caused Eastern European satellite states to break away in 1989, and the USSR could not afford to hold them together. In December 1991, just 900 days after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. No war, just internal economic implosion. The pattern is universal: military overextension, productive failure, currency irrelevance, resource depletion, total collapse. The United States has followed this sequence almost perfectly and has already completed 5 of the 6 stages. Its military commitments are global and unsustainable. 750 bases in 80 countries, deployments in 150 countries, and an $850 billion annual defense budget. Like Spain and Britain, it is stretched too thin. Currency debasement began in 1971 when Nixon ended the dollar's link to gold. The dollar became pure fiat, backed only by trust in the government. Since then, the money supply has exploded, and the dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power compared to 1971. The debt spiral is now crushing. National debt exceeds $36 trillion, about 120% of GDP. Interest payments exceed $1 trillion annually, more than the defense budget. America borrows simply to pay interest, just as Spain once did. The nation has lost productive capacity. Its industrial base has been offshored. It imports everything from medicine to electronics. Like Spain relying on colonial silver, America relies on the dollar's reserve status to afford imports. When the world stops using dollars, the United States will face the same crisis Spain did when the silver ran out. Social decline is unmistakable. Trust in institutions is collapsing. Urban crime is rising. Homelessness and drug overdoses are rampant. Fertility rates are falling. Political polarization is extreme. America is fragmenting internally. The final stage, loss of reserve currency status, has already begun. The petrodollar system is weakening as Saudi Arabia accepts Chinese yuan for oil. BRICS nations are building alternatives to the dollar. Central banks are stockpiling gold. More countries are trading in local currencies. Global dollar reserves are declining. When confidence breaks, excess dollars will flood back into the United States, causing massive inflation. The endgame follows 3 possible paths: a controlled decline like Britain's, a chaotic collapse like Rome's, or a global restructuring triggered by war. The dangerous dynamic between the rising power, China, and the current hegemon, the United States, evokes the Thucydides trap, historically resolved by war in most cases. The question is not whether America will collapse, but when, and whether that collapse will trigger a catastrophic global conflict. The pattern never fails. The United States is nearing its moment of reckoning, and the lessons of Rome, Spain, Britain and the Soviet Union make clear that there is little time left to reverse course. If you stayed until the end, you are amazing. Give us a like so we know how many reached the conclusion, and don't forget to share your episode suggestions in the comments.